Shadows of Promise. Rosalind Morgan smoothed her hand over her 8-month pregnant belly, feeling the small flutter of movement beneath her fingertips. From the window of their waterfront penthouse, she watched sailboats drift across the harbor, like white butterflies. Everything in her life gleamed with perfection. The marble countertops, the designer furniture, the view worth millions. And at the center of it all, Julian, her husband of 3 years, whose investment firm had transformed him from ambitious college graduate to financial wunderkind before he'd turned 30. "Are you sure you'll be okay alone this weekend?" Julian asked, his overnight bag already packed by the door. "The conference in Phoenix is only 3 days. I can have my assistant check in on you." Rosalind smiled, pushing away the flutter of unease that had become her constant companion lately. "I'm fine. The baby isn't due for another 3 weeks. Go dazzle them with your brilliance." Julian kissed her forehead, his cologne expensive and subtle. "That's my girl, always understanding." His phone buzzed, and he checked it with that small frown she'd grown familiar with, the one that appeared whenever business demanded his attention. "Car's here. I've left emergency numbers on the fridge. Don't hesitate to call." After he left, the penthouse fell into the peculiar silence that seemed to have grown deeper over the past months. Rosalind wandered through rooms that felt more like a magazine spread than a home, past framed photographs of their wedding in Santorini, their safari honeymoon, their life of carefully curated perfection. She hadn't told Julian about the text message she'd seen flash across his phone screen last week. "Missing you already. Thursday can't come soon enough." The message from someone named V had appeared while Julian was in the shower, and she'd pretended not to see it when he returned. Thursday, when he'd told her he had a client dinner, just as this weekend was supposedly a financial conference. Rosalind settled onto the sofa, scrolling through her contacts. Her friends had gradually fallen away as Julian's star had risen, her old college roommates intimidated by their wealth, her former co-workers distant since she'd left her job at Julian's insistence. Her parents were traveling through Europe, a trip she and Julian had gifted them for their 40th anniversary. The sharp pain came without warning, a tight band across her lower abdomen that made her gasp. She glanced at the clock. 7:30 p.m. Too early, she thought. Just Braxton Hicks. But 20 minutes later, another contraction gripped her, stronger this time. By 9 o'clock, there was no denying it. Her water broke as she was calling for a rideshare to the hospital. Panic fluttered in her chest as she dialed Julian's number. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. "Nothing. Julian, the baby's coming. I'm heading to Memorial Hospital. Please call me." Her voice remained calm, despite the fear coursing through her. 3 hours later, in a hospital gown with monitors beeping around her, Rosalind tried Julian's phone for the 12th time. A nurse, with kind eyes, asked if there was anyone else she could call. "He's at a conference," Rosalind explained, the lie tasting bitter. "The reception must be bad." At midnight, desperate and in pain, she called Julian's assistant, waking her from sleep. "Mrs. Morgan, is everything all right? I'm in labor and I can't reach Julian. Do you have the hotel information for his Phoenix conference?" A pause. Too long. "Phoenix conference?" "Yes," Rosalind said, as another contraction built. "The financial summit he's attending." "Mrs. Morgan," the assistant's voice faltered. "Mr. Morgan isn't at a conference in Phoenix. He's at the Oceanside Resort in Newport. He's been planning this weekend for months." The contraction peaked, and Rosalind squeezed her eyes shut, pain and betrayal twisting together inside her. When it passed, she thanked the assistant and hung up. With shaking fingers, she opened Instagram and searched for the resort. The most recent post, just 2 hours old, showed sunset cocktails on a terrace, and there in the background, unmistakable despite the distance, was Julian, his arm around a willowy woman with copper hair, both laughing as they raised their glasses to the fading light. Solitary dawn. The delivery room buzzed with quiet efficiency as monitors beeped and nurses moved around Rosalind. Outside, a storm had gathered, rain lashing against the windows like tears she refused to shed. 7 hours into labor, and still no word from Julian despite the increasingly desperate messages she'd left. "You're doing great, Mrs. Morgan," encouraged Dr. Penelope Wright, her experienced eyes monitoring both Rosalind and the screens displaying her baby's heartbeat. "Only a few more centimeters to go." Rosalind nodded, focusing on her breathing techniques from prenatal classes she'd attended. Alone because Julian always had meetings. Another contraction built, and she gripped the railings of the hospital bed, riding the wave of pain that seemed endless. Between contractions, her mind kept returning to that Instagram photo. Julian laughing with the copper-haired woman while she fought through this alone. Had he silenced his phone deliberately? Was he even now kissing that woman, oblivious to his child's imminent arrival? The thought brought a different kind of pain, sharper than anything physical. "Is there anyone else we can call for you?" asked a nurse with silver-streaked hair and gentle hands. Her name tag read Marjorie. "Family, perhaps? A friend?" Rosalind shook her head. "My parents are in Europe. Another contraction cut off her words, and she focused on breathing through it. When it subsided, she finished weakly, "I don't have anyone close by." The truth of those words hit her with unexpected force. How had she allowed herself to become so isolated? Julian had always insisted they were enough for each other, had subtly discouraged her friendships, had suggested her parents' trip at a time when they would be unavailable for the birth. "Well, you have us," Marjorie said firmly, adjusting Rosalind's pillow. "And soon you'll have this little one. Sometimes that's all the family you need to start with." At 4:17 a.m., after 19 hours of labor, Rosalind's daughter entered the world with a powerful cry that seemed to shake the storm clouds outside. 7 pounds, 3 ounces of perfect new life placed on her chest, tiny fingers splayed like starfish, eyes squeezed shut against the brightness of the world. "Hello, Sophia," Rosalind whispered, the name she'd chosen months ago, though Julian had pushed for something more distinctive. In that moment, as her daughter's warmth nestled against her skin, something shifted within Rosalind's heart. A fierceness welled up, protective and absolute. "It's just you and me now." Dr. Wright completed her work efficiently, her hands steady and sure. "She's perfect, Mrs. Morgan. Strong lungs, good color. You did beautifully." By dawn, the storm had passed. Rosalind sat propped up in bed, Sophia sleeping in her arms when her phone finally rang. Julian's name flashed on the screen. With a steadiness that surprised her, she answered. "Ros, sorry I missed your calls. Reception was terrible at the resort, conference center." His voice sounded slightly slurred. "Everything okay?" "No, Julian, everything is not okay." Her voice was low to avoid waking Sophia. "I gave birth to our daughter 4 hours ago, alone." Silence stretched between them, then Julian's voice suddenly alert. "What? But you weren't due for weeks." "Babies come when they're ready," she replied, a strange calm settling over her, just like the truth. "I'm on my way," he said quickly. "I can be there I know where you are, Julian, and who you're with." Another silence, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, dropping the pretense. "Ros, it's not what you think. Veronica is just—" "Save it," Rosalind interrupted. "I don't care anymore. What I care about is that while I was bringing our child into the world, you were laughing with your mistress at a seaside resort. Let me explain." "There's nothing to explain, but there are decisions to make." Rosalind looked down at Sophia, her tiny face peaceful in sleep. "I won't be at the penthouse when you return." "Don't be ridiculous," Julian said, his tone hardening. "Where would you go? With what money? Be reasonable, Rosalind." His condescension, so familiar it had become almost invisible during their marriage, now stood out in stark relief. How many times had he used that tone to guide her decisions, to shape her choices until they resembled his own? "Goodbye, Julian." She ended the call and turned off her phone. 2 days later, Rosalind checked out of the hospital with Sophia bundled in a soft yellow blanket. Marjorie had helped her make arrangements, calling in favors from hospital social services. In her purse were the emergency credit cards Julian didn't know about, cards she'd maintained from her working days before marriage. In her heart was a resolution as solid as stone. A taxi waited to take them to the train station. Rosalind had purchased tickets to Meadowbrook, the small town where she'd grown up, where a few old connections might still remain. She had called her former boss at the publishing house, who had promised to help her find freelance editing work she could do remotely while caring for Sophia. As the taxi pulled away from the hospital, Rosalind didn't look back at the gleaming city skyline, where her old life lay. Instead, she gazed down at her daughter's sleeping face. "We're going to build something new," she whispered. "Something real, something that can't be broken by one person's betrayal. I promise you that." The taxi merged onto the highway, carrying them toward an uncertain future. But for the first time in years, uncertainty didn't frighten Rosalind. It felt like freedom. Retry a Part 3, Edit Part 3. Fractured Empire. Julian Morgan straightened his silk tie in the mirror of the Newport Hotel suite, trying to ignore the pounding in his temples, remnants of last night's excessive champagne. Veronica lounged on the rumpled bed behind him, copper hair spilling across the pillows as she scrolled through her phone. "Your wife called you like 20 times, she remarked, glancing at his phone on the nightstand. "Trouble in paradise?" Julian scowled. "Nothing I can't handle." He'd deal with Rosalind later, concoct some story about a dead phone battery and poor reception. She always believed him eventually. His own phone chimed with a message. Expecting Rosalind, he was surprised to see his assistant's name instead. Emergency at the office, board requesting immediate conference call. Harrison threatening to pull investment. "I have to go," he told Veronica, already gathering his things. "Business emergency." Veronica sat up, the sheet falling away. "You promised me the whole weekend, Julian. The yacht is reserved for this afternoon. I'll make it up to you." He kissed her quickly. Just a minor fire to put out. 3 hours later, Julian sat in his office, tie loosened, staring at spreadsheets that refused to make sense. Harrison Investments had withdrawn their 8-figure backing, citing concerns about operational transparency. 2 other major investors had requested urgent meetings. His assistant hovered nervously at the door. "Sir, there's something else." She placed a tablet in front of him. On the screen was a financial blog with the headline, "Morgan Capital under investigation. Sources allege accounting irregularities." "What the hell is this?" Julian demanded, scrolling through the article that detailed suspicious patterns in his firm's reported earnings. "It gets worse," his assistant said quietly. "Your wife gave birth yesterday morning. A girl. She's not answering your calls because she knows about Veronica. Apparently, someone posted photos from the resort." Julian's world tilted sideways. "Find her," he ordered, "and get my PR team and lawyers in here now." By evening, Julian had discovered 3 devastating facts. The SEC was indeed investigating his company for financial reporting discrepancies. Rosalind had checked out of the hospital with their daughter and left no forwarding address. And most bizarrely, his chief financial officer had disappeared, taking with him server access codes and critical financial documentation. His phone rang. Veronica. "I saw the news," she said without preamble. "Is it true? Are you under investigation?" "It's a misunderstanding," Julian assured her smoothly. "My legal team is handling it. And the rumors about hidden losses, the offshore accounts." Julian froze. Those details hadn't been in any public reports. "Who have you been talking to?" A pause. "No one important. Just concerned about my Investment. Your investment. Julian's voice hardened. What are you talking about? The money I transferred last month. The opportunity you said was guaranteed. Julian's blood ran cold. He had never discussed investments with Veronica, had never taken her money. That wasn't me, he said slowly. I never asked you to invest anything. Veronica's laugh held no humor. Right. Next you'll say you never asked me to introduce you to those Saudi investors either. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. His CFO and Veronica had been working together, using him as bait to lure investors whose money never quite made it into the official books. 2 weeks later, Julian sat alone in his penthouse, surrounded by the detritus of what had once been a perfect life. His firm was in freefall, his assets frozen, his reputation in tatters. The SEC investigation had expanded to include wire fraud and investor deception. Veronica had vanished, along with nearly $4 million from various investors. Her social media scrubbed clean as if she'd never existed. His phone, once constantly buzzing with messages from clients, partners and friends, sat silent except for calls from his lawyers. Even his country club membership had been quietly suspended. Julian poured himself another scotch, his third of the afternoon, and stared at the skyline through windows that no longer felt like they belonged to him. How had it all unraveled so quickly? Just 20 days ago, he'd been Julian Morgan, financial prodigy, man with the golden touch. A sharp knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Expecting more bad news, perhaps another subpoena, he opened it to find 2 uniformed police officers. "Julian Morgan?" one asked. "Yes? We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of securities fraud, wire fraud, and financial reporting violations." As they read him his rights, Julian thought of Rosalind, who had never questioned his late nights, who had believed in his success, who had given birth to his child while he betrayed her. Where was she now? Would she see his downfall, splashed across the news? Would she feel vindicated or just sadly unsurprised? The officers led him through the building's marble lobby, past doormen who averted their eyes. Outside, a news van had already gathered, cameras capturing his disheveled appearance and the handcuffs at his wrists. In the police car, Julian closed his eyes against the flashing lights. The empire he had built, much of it smoke and mirrors, he now realized, had collapsed in less than a month. His mistress had betrayed him. His business partners had abandoned. Him and his wife had disappeared with the only thing of true value he had ever created. "Can I make a call?" he asked the officer. "At the station," came the reply. Julian nodded, already knowing there was no one left to call. No one who would answer anyway. As the city streaked by outside the window, he understood with perfect clarity that he had lost everything because he had never truly valued anything. Unexpected sanctuary. Meadowbrook welcomed Rosalind and Sophia with a gentle indifference that felt like balm after the intensity of city life. The small town, tucked against the foothills, hadn't changed much in the decades since she'd left. The same Victorian storefronts lined Main Street, the same park with its wrought-iron gazebo hosted farmers' markets on Saturdays, and the same endless whisper of pine trees surrounded it all. Rosalind had rented a tiny cottage on Cedar Lane, using cash from her emergency account to pay 2 months' rent up front. The landlady, Mrs. Barnett, had raised an eyebrow at the city address on Rosalind's ID, but asked no questions when she saw the sleeping newborn. "Need some love," Mrs. Barnett had said, handing over the keys to the faded yellow cottage. "But it's clean and the roof's sound." Her phone vibrated beside her. Another message from her parents, frantic after learning of her sudden departure and Julian's arrest from international news. She had finally answered them yesterday, assuring them she and the baby were safe, but providing no details. They were cutting their trip short, but it would still be days before they returned. The other messages, from Julian's lawyers, from former society friends hungry for gossip, from reporters seeking comment, she deleted without reading. A car pulled into the gravel driveway, startling her. A sensible blue sedan, not the sleek sports car Julian favored. A man emerged, tall with rumpled dark hair, carrying what looked like a medical bag. "Mrs. Morgan!" he called, keeping a respectful distance from the porch. "I'm Dr. Ethan Warner. The hospital sent me for your postnatal follow-up. I'm covering for Dr. Williams this month." Rosalind shifted Sophia to her shoulder, buttoning her blouse. "I didn't realize house calls were still a thing." The doctor smiled, lines crinkling around kind eyes. "They usually aren't, but Meadowbrook is special that way. Small town, one doctor, lots of ground to cover. May I come up?" Rosalind nodded, leading him inside to the small living room where she'd set up a changing area for Sophia. Dr. Warner moved with a quiet efficiency, examining the baby first. Gentle hands, checking reflexes, eyes, ears, the healing umbilical site. "She's perfect," he pronounced, letting Sophia grasp his finger with her tiny hand. "Gaining weight nicely, and how about you? Any concerns, pain, excessive bleeding?" Rosalind answered his questions candidly, finding his professional manner reassuring. No judgment in his eyes, no prying into why a woman with a Manhattan address was living in a rundown cottage in Meadowbrook. "Well, you both seem to be doing remarkably well," he said, packing up his stethoscope. "Physically, at least." He hesitated. "Mrs. Morgan, please call me Rosalind." "Rosalind, then. I know it's not my place, but if you need anything, resources, connections, just someone to talk to, Meadowbrook looks after its own. Even the new arrivals." Something in his sincerity made her throat tighten. "Thank you, but we're managing." He nodded, respecting her boundaries. "Of course. I'll leave my card. The office number and my personal cell are both on there." After he left, Rosalind found herself staring at his card. Dr. Ethan Warner, family medicine, the first new connection in her fresh start. Days passed in the rhythm of newborn care, feeding, changing, brief naps whenever Sophia slept. Between these moments, Rosalind began picking up freelance editing work, grateful that her skills remained marketable, even as her former life crumbled publicly. The news of Julian's arrest had made national headlines, with financial analysts dissecting the fall of Morgan Capital in excruciating detail. One evening, a knock at her door revealed Mrs. Barnett holding a covered dish. "Lasagna," the older woman announced. "Figured you might not have time for cooking with the little one." Before Rosalind could properly thank her, another neighbor appeared with a basket of baby clothes. "My grandson outgrew these," she explained. "No sense letting them go to waste." Soon her porch held a small gathering, Mrs. Barnett, 3 neighbors, and to her surprise, Dr. Warner, who arrived last with a bag of groceries. "Town grapevine," he explained with a sheepish smile. "Word gets around when someone needs a little help." To her own astonishment, Rosalind invited them all in. The cottage filled with conversation and warmth as they cooed over Sophia, tactfully avoiding any mention of Julian or the headlines. Dr. Warner, Ethan, as he insisted she call him, stayed to help clean up after the others left. "I hope we didn't overwhelm you," he said, drying the last plate. "Small towns can be enthusiastic about welcoming new people." "It was nice," Rosalind admitted, "different from what I'm used to." "And what are you used to?" The question was gentle, without pressure. Rosalind considered deflecting, but found herself wanting to answer. "Relationships with agendas, social circles where your value is measured by your husband's success or your last charity donation." She looked around the humble kitchen. "This is the first place I've lived in years where I don't feel like I'm performing a role." Ethan nodded. "Meadowbrook has its faults, but pretentiousness isn't one of them." As he was leaving, Sophia began to fuss. Without thinking, Ethan reached out, his physician's hands confidently lifting the baby. "May I?" Rosalind nodded, watching, as he paced the small living room, gently bouncing Sophia until her cries subsided. "You're good with her," Rosalind observed. "I wanted to be a pediatrician originally," he explained. "Life had other plans, but I've always loved working with children." He carefully handed Sophia back. "She has your eyes." The simple observation, noticing something of Rosalind in her daughter, not Julian, touched her unexpectedly. "Thank you for coming today, for the groceries and everything. That's what neighbors do," he said with a smile. At the door he added, "There's a community picnic this weekend at the park, very casual. Sophia might enjoy the fresh air and you might enjoy meeting more people without agendas." After he left, Rosalind stood in the doorway watching his car disappear down the lane. For the first time since leaving the hospital, the future didn't loom as a terrifying blank. Instead, it felt like an open page, waiting for her to write something. New gardens after rain. Autumn painted Meadowbrook in brilliant hues of amber and crimson as September gave way to October. Rosalind sat at her cottage desk, completing her latest freelance editing project, while Sophia napped in the portable crib beside her. 6 months had transformed both their lives, the cottage now adorned with cheery curtains and second-hand furniture, its walls freshly painted a warm cream that caught the afternoon light. Outside, Ethan tended to the small vegetable garden they had planted together in the spring, his weekend routine whenever he wasn't on call. Their relationship had evolved with the gentle patience of something natural and unforced. Friendship, deepening through shared meals, quiet evenings on the porch swing, and his unwavering support as Rosalind built her new life. Her editing business had flourished, with clients now seeking her out based on recommendations rather than her desperately searching for work. Last month, she had even hired a part-time assistant in town, Mrs. Barnett's niece, who watched Sophia 2 mornings a week while Rosalind worked on larger projects. The sharp ring of her phone interrupted her thoughts. Unknown number, Manhattan area code. Her heart quickened. Calls from the city rarely brought good news. After Julian's conviction, 3 months ago, she had hoped the lawyers and reporters would finally leave her alone. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Rosalind." Julian's voice, once so familiar, now sounded like a stranger's. "They finally let me make a personal call." She glanced at Sophia, peacefully sleeping, and moved to the porch to continue the conversation. "What do you want, Julian?" "To apologize, to explain." His voice held none of the smoothness that had once charmed investors and society wives alike. "I've had a lot of time to think in here. 6 years isn't enough time to justify what you did," Rosalind replied, referring to his prison sentence. "Not just to me, but to everyone who trusted you." "I know." A pause. "I also know about the divorce papers. My lawyers forwarded them." Rosalind had filed for divorce 4 months ago, requesting no alimony, only child support for Sophia. When Julian eventually had income again, she had claimed no part of his frozen assets or their former home, wanting nothing tainted by his deceptions. "Will you fight it?" she asked. "No." Another pause. "There's something else. My mother's estate. It was separate from my business. The trustees contacted me. It's not much after everything, but it's something for Sophia. A trust fund for her. Education, untouchable by my creditors." Rosalind watched Ethan working in the garden, his hands steady and sure as he harvested the last tomatoes of the season. The same hands that had checked Sophia's first fever, that had held Rosalind's when she finally broke down and told him everything about her marriage. "Thank you for that," she said finally. "She deserves a future unburdened by the past." "Will you ever tell her about me?" Julian's voice cracked slightly. "When she's old enough to understand, yes, she has a right to know her history. But Julian," Rosalind's voice strengthened, I won't lie to her about any of it. I understand. He sounded resigned. Are you happy, Roz? The question surprised her. Julian had rarely concerned himself with her happiness beyond how it reflected on him. She looked at the life she had built from nothing, her thriving business, her cozy home, her healthy daughter, and the community that had embraced them. Most of all, she thought of the authentic relationships she had formed, especially with Ethan, whose affection came without demands or conditions. Yes, she answered truthfully. I am. After ending the call, Rosalind returned to find Sophia, awake, babbling happily in her crib. She lifted her daughter, inhaling the sweet scent of her hair, and carried her outside to the garden. Ethan looked up, soil smudging his cheek, his smile warming as they approached. Hey, you two, look what we've got. He held up an improbably large zucchini. Mrs. Barnett will be impressed at the farmer's market tomorrow. That was Julian, Rosalind said without preamble, settling on the garden bench. On the phone. Ethan's expression grew serious as he sat beside her. Are you okay? Most of all, that woman would never have imagined finding love again. Not the dazzling, possessive kind Julian had offered, but something steadier and more profound. Love that revealed itself in garden vegetables and midnight pediatric advice, in honest conversations and shared silences. That evening, as the first snow of the season dusted Meadowbrook in silver, Rosalind stood in the doorway of her soon-to-be former cottage, watching Ethan clear her walkway. Behind her, Sophia slept peacefully, unaware that her life had been transformed by her mother's single courageous choice made in a hospital room months ago. Rosalind stepped outside, her breath clouding in the cold air. Come inside before you... Oh, freeze, she called to Ethan. I've made hot chocolate. He leaned the shovel against the porch railing and followed her inside, stamping snow from his boots. In the warm light of her small kitchen, his eyes met hers with a question that had been building between them for months. Stay, she said simply, answering before he could ask. Not just tonight. Stay for all of it. The renovations, the birthdays, the hard days and the good ones. Ethan's smile broke across his face like sunrise. I was going to ask if you'd like to open a joint bank account for the house repairs, but I like your question better. Rosalind laughed, the sound free and unguarded. Is that a yes? Instead of answering, he closed the distance between them, his kiss tasting of snowflakes and possibility. Behind them, a log shifted in the fireplace, sending sparks dancing upward, like wishes finding their way to the stars. In her old life, Rosalind had learned that some storms destroy everything in their path. But standing in Ethan's embrace, with Sophia sleeping peacefully in the next room, she understood the more profound truth. After the fiercest storms, in soil washed clean of what came before, the most unexpected gardens can grow.